Ready for a deep dive? Today, we're tackling storytelling.
Storytelling.
Well, not just any storytelling. We're exploring how leaders use it, especially when it comes to the environment.
Okay, this I've got to hear.
Our guide is Professor David Michael Boje.
He's like the authority on ethics and storytelling, right?
You got it. He's especially focused on leadership and sustainability.
And how those stories or narratives shape real-world actions.
Exactly. And Boje's own journey is woven into his work.
Yeah, he's got that fascinating background, exploring different faiths, ultimately landing on Jainism.
And that gives him this unique perspective, this emphasis on interconnectedness.
Which makes you wonder, how does someone like that view leaders like, say, Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump?
That's exactly what we're digging into.
Because their approaches to something as big as the environment, that's a story in itself.
It really is.
Yeah.
And Boje has this concept of true storytelling versus fake storytelling.
So do their words match their actions?
Exactly. It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Especially when it comes to something as crucial as environmental policy.
Right. So how does this true storytelling versus fake storytelling actually play out? Give me an example.
Right. Take Trump's 2020 campaign. He talked a lot about protecting public lands, right?
Right. He made a big deal about it.
But then his administration rolled back over 100 environmental regulations.
Wait, really? Over 100?
A record, actually.
Wow. Okay, so that seems like a pretty clear example of what Boje would call fake storytelling.
Exactly. Words and actions clearly don't match up there.
And that makes you question the sincerity of the message, right? Like, are they really committed to environmental protection, or is it just rhetoric?
It's easy to get caught up in the surface level, but Boje's got this concept called Tamerland. Imagine a play with different scenes going on in different rooms simultaneously.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
So in huge organizations like governments, there are so many moving parts, hidden agendas, decisions happening on multiple levels.
It's like trying to understand a whole ecosystem by looking at just one species. Right.
Exactly, and that's Tamerland. We might only be seeing a tiny piece of the environmental policy puzzle.
So how do we even begin to navigate this Tamerland? How can we tell the real story from the spin?
That's where quantum storytelling comes in. It challenges us to ditch this idea that things are separate.
Quantum storytelling. Okay, that sounds a little complex. Break it down for me.
Imagine the world as a giant spider web.
Okay, I'm with you.
Even the slightest touch sends ripples across the whole thing, right?
All connected.
Precisely. And our actions, big or small, they all have these ripple effects.
So quantum storytelling is about recognizing those connections, especially when it comes to something as interconnected as the environment.
Absolutely. Our decisions impact more than we realize, and that ties directly into Boje's heart of care. This idea that we approach every decision with a sense of responsibility.
Responsibility for the planet, for future generations.
And all beings. It's the opposite of that worldview where human needs always come first.
And that brings us to this whole debate around dominion versus stewardship when we're talking about the environment, right?
Right. Like, are we meant to rule over nature, or are we caretakers?
And that seems particularly relevant when you look at leaders like Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. They seem to embody those two contrasting views.
You hit the nail on the head. They're almost like living embodiments of those different interpretations of our role on Earth. It's like they're living out those contrasting views in real time. Harris, with her Baptist background, seems to lean towards stewardship. You know, that idea that we're caretakers of the Earth.
Responsible for protecting it, not just exploiting it for our own gain.
Exactly. But then you have Trump and his rollback of environmental regulations. That seems to align more with the dominion perspective, wouldn't you say?
It's like he's operating from that place of humans having dominion over nature. It's a very different way of seeing the world.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Boje draws this parallel between King James commissioning the King James Bible.
Okay, back up a bit. King James, as in the King James Bible.
The one and only.
Okay, but what does that have to do with Donald Trump and environmental policy?
Well, Boje argues that King James wanted to solidify his power, right?
Makes sense. Every king wants that.
So he commissioned a version of the Bible that really emphasized that dominion aspect.
Interesting. So it's about more than just translating scripture. It's about shaping a narrative that supports a particular worldview.
Exactly. And that narrative, that sense of dominion over the earth, it's been used to justify a lot of environmental exploitation over the centuries.
Wow. Okay, I'm starting to see where you're going with this, but how does Trump selling the God Bless the USA Bible fit into all of this?
Because that Bible, It's based on the King James Version.
Ah, I see. It's like he's tapping into that same narrative. Even if it's unintentional, it subtly reinforces that interpretation of dominion over the environment.
And that's Boje's point. He's saying that it ignores the nuances of the original Hebrew word rada.
Rada, what does that mean?
It can actually be translated as responsible stewardship. So it's not just about ruling over nature, but caring for it.
It's about recognizing that delicate balance, our responsibility to protect and preserve. It makes you think about the kind of anti-narrative these leaders are creating, the future they're shaping with their words and their actions.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Are they betting on a future where we continue to exploit the planet? Or one where we finally learn to live in harmony with it?
It feels like we're at a crossroads. Like the choices we make today will have ripple effects for generations to come.
We are, and that's why Boje talks about spiritual capitalism. It might sound like an oxymoron, but bear with me.
Spiritual capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
I'm intrigued, but I need you to unpack that one for me.
It's not really about religion in the traditional sense. It's more about shifting our values away from just profit, just consumption.
Towards a more holistic view of success.
Exactly. Imagine a world where businesses operate with that heart of care we were talking about, where sustainability and profit aren't at odds but work together.
Where doing good is good for business, not just the bottom line.
Now you're getting it. Boje believes businesses can be a powerful force for change, but only if they embrace this more holistic, interconnected perspective.
And that kind of change, it requires a different kind of leadership, doesn't it? We've talked about ensemble leadership, moving away from that hero CEO model.
It's about ditching the top-down approach. Imagine a company where everyone, from the intern to the CEO, feels empowered to speak up, share ideas, be part of the solution.
A true collaboration, where everyone feels a sense of ownership over the company's story, its impact on the world.
And that takes humility. Being willing to admit you don't have all the answers, that the best ideas can come from unexpected places.
Those qualities, humility, listening, collaboration, they don't exactly scream traditional leadership. It's almost like we need a whole new vocabulary for what it means to lead in the 21st century.
You hit the nail on the head. We need leaders who are brave enough to embrace uncertainty, to empower others, to prioritize the well-being of the planet alongside profits.
Because the story isn't over yet, is it? We're still writing it, every single day, with the choices we make.
We have the power to shift the narrative, to write a new story for ourselves, for the planet, for generations to come. But it starts with recognizing our own role in this grand, interconnected web of life.
It's inspiring, but I have to admit, a little daunting. It feels like a lot to process. Where do we even begin to shift these narratives? What can we actually do?
It's a question a lot of people ask, and Boje offers some practical tools.
Like what?
Well, he's a huge proponent of problem-based learning.
So, less theory, more action.
Exactly. It's about tackling real-world sustainability challenges head-on.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Instead of just reading about environmental problems, why not roll up your sleeves and get involved in finding solutions?
So it's about understanding that we all have a role to play, right?
Absolutely. And that includes the business world.
How so?
Boje, along with Kenneth Jorgensen, argues that we need ecological business models, ones where sustainability and profit go hand in hand.
So businesses don't have to choose between doing good and making money.
Precisely. It's about changing the narrative. Profit and sustainability can coexist, even reinforce each other.
But that requires a very different mindset, a new approach to leadership.
Right, which brings us back to ensemble leadership.
Instead of that hero CEO at the top, it's more about collaboration.
Exactly. Imagine a company where everyone feels empowered to contribute.
Where ideas can come from anywhere, not just the top.
Exactly. Transparency, open communication, that's key.
So it's less about hierarchy and more about everyone feeling a sense of ownership.
And responsibility. It takes a certain kind of leader to foster that environment.
Someone who's not afraid to say, I don't have all the answers.
Someone who values diverse perspectives, who listens more than they speak.
It's fun. Those qualities, humility, listening, they don't exactly scream traditional leadership.
It's a whole new paradigm, isn't it? That's a paradigm we desperately need.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Boje's work, it feels like we're left with more than just theories. It's a call to action.
A call to rewrite the narrative. Our own personal narratives, the stories we tell in our communities and our businesses.
To ask ourselves, what kind of future are we creating with our words and our actions?
Because the story isn't over, we're still writing it together.
So let's make it a story worth telling. A story of courage, collaboration, and a deep, abiding respect for the planet and all its inhabitants. That's it for this deep dive. We hope you found this exploration of David Michael Boje's work thought-provoking and maybe even a little bit inspiring. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep pushing boundaries, and keep writing your own story for a better future.